Marisha here with part two of my reaction to the article 20 American Things the Rest of the World Doesn't Understand. Now, if you missed the first part, you can check that out here, but let's get started with number 11 on the list, red Solo cups. Okay, I don't understand why this is on the list. It doesn't seem like that big of a thing. Like, we have plastic cups, they happen to be red. Why is that causing consternation to people? I don't understand. If you are someone who is confused about red Solo cups, I guess put it in the comments and let me know why this would be on the list. It just seems like a really strange thing for people to kind of get stuck on. So let's move on. Ah, this is one of my predictions that came true here, car culture. Um, yeah, Americans love our cars. It's a huge country with terrible public transportation, but almost everyone has a car. Um, and I am very American in the sense that I find myself missing driving. I love driving. I love a road trip. Um, I think especially if you're from like the Midwest, you're willing to drive for hours and hours and it's like not a big deal. Whereas in the UK, I know people who haven't seen their grandmother in years because she lives an hour away. Like, which is so strange to me, right? Um, whereas for example, in the States, when I was living in Virginia, um, I would take 10-hour drives to go visit my parents in Michigan at least like twice a year, like for Christmas and the summer. I would just get in my car and drive for 10 hours, and that wasn't a big deal. And lots of Americans do that. We take road trips. We are very car dependent. Yes, we absolutely need to be better about public transportation, and I totally understand why someone from Europe, especially, would come to the States and be confused slash frustrated by the lack of public transportation, right? If you come to the US and you want to visit more than just, oh, I'm going to New York City or I'm going to LA or whatever, um, you're probably going to have to rent a car to get to the places that you want to go. Um, and I know in the UK, it's not unusual for people to not have a driving license. When I first started watching British television and I would hear people talking about how like they don't have a driver's license or they never took their driver's test or didn't pass their driver's test and they're adults and I was aghast like what do you mean you don't have a driver's license? That is a rite of passage in the States. And honestly, as unfair as this might be, um people will sort of view you as not mature if you don't have a driver's license. They will almost take, it's kind of infantilizing not to have a driver's license in the US. And that, yeah, that might not be fair, but that is absolutely the culture. And so I understand why it would be on this list, why people outside of the US would find that strange. The drinking age, yes, right. I did mention this. Agreed. It is bizarre to me that we allow people to vote and we allow people to enlist in the army and die for their country, but we don't allow them to drink. The American attitude toward alcohol is a strange one. I mean, I just have to look at the history of prohibition. And then I think that in other places in Europe, maybe not Britain so much, but in places like France or Germany, Italy, the attitude toward alcohol is much healthier. It's just like, yeah, you're gonna have a glass of wine or a beer with your dinner, right? Whereas the American attitude toward alcohol is generally the goal is to get drunk, which is a problem, obviously. So it's yeah, American attitudes toward alcohol are really strange. And the drinking age, I don't think there's really any defense for it. And it is something that comes up frequently in the US. There are lots of people who bring it up and say, like, how unreasonable it is that a person can fight for their country, but they can't have a beer with their dinner. And so there are people who are wanting to change the law, but like I said in the previous video about currency, it's really hard to get people to change sometimes, in spite of all of the logical reasons for enacting that change. So I get it, Europe. I get why you would be confused by that. Bumper stickers. Okay, yeah, that would not have occurred to me, but now that I read it and I think about it, yeah, you don't see bumper stickers in the UK. Um, and obviously it's tied to the whole car culture because cars are so common. It is, like I said, a rite of passage to get your driver's license. The expectation is if you are a functioning adult at some point, like you'll own a car. um and so it kind of becomes an extension of who you are, and you are spending a lot more time in your car than, people in Europe would, because most of them might not even own a car, they're using public transportation, etc. But if you're coming from a culture where you would hop in your car and take, a 3-day car trip over the summer to get to the other side of the country or whatever, and you are in your car for work and you're commuting like an hour each way, which is pretty normal for some people. Then you kind of want to personalize your car. And so in addition to bumper stickers, we have, things that will hang from the rear view mirror, or, some people with no class will hang balls, like fake balls from the bottom of their trucks or whatever. But yeah, different ways that people try to, well, we even had a show, right, Pimp My Ride, about it. And yeah, it never would have occurred to me until I saw this and started thinking about it. But in a way, bumper stickers are kind of a strange thing. Um, Although, when they're bumper stickers that are put there for amusement as opposed for political statement, they are really fun. It is, when you find yourself stuck in traffic and you're behind someone who has a few bumper stickers that are funny, um, that does help the commute be a little bit less onerous. That's, I guess, the defense that I'll make for bumper stickers. Flags everywhere. I should have guessed this one because I've seen people talk about this. And actually, David Mitchell wrote a really interesting article about this several years ago for The Observer slash The Guardian. I came across it in one of his books, which was a compilation of those essays. But he was talking about a politician, and I don't know if this is the correct name, but it was something like Jenrick or something like that, who had been made fun of for appearing on television for an interview with a giant, like, Union Jack behind him in his office. And people made fun of him because they were like, oh, that's like, what is he, American? And Mitchell was talking about how, like, in the UK, you don't display the flag everywhere because you know that you're a great country. You know that, you were the first country to come up with postage stamps and etc. or whatever. And so you don't need to, like, brag about your country by flying your flag everywhere. And I do find the flying the American flag everywhere thing kind of strange in the States. I think that pledging allegiance to the flag is a strange thing to do in a country that is a democracy and champions, freedoms. That seems like more of a totalitarian thing to do. Um, and particularly these days, it tends to be one particular political party or people who lean in that party who will fly their flags outside of their homes, like private homes. Um, I don't like that has started to become a symbol of a particular party instead of just a unifying symbol of the country, but that's sort of what it's becoming. And even before that started, back when I was a kid and the flag did just mean like the country. Um, I think if someone had brought it to my attention, I certainly wouldn't have thought about it on my own. But if I had been going to other countries and someone had brought it to my attention, I probably would have thought it was weird that people fly their flags everywhere, that as a private citizen on your own property, in your like outside of your home, that you would fly your country's flag, does seem a little, a bit much like propaganda, um and strange. Like, can't you prove your patriotism by just being a good citizen? So yeah, I do understand why people would find that strange when they come to the US. Prescription drug advertisements everywhere. Yeah. So a lot of these things are things that I think Americans don't obviously think about, because unless you go somewhere else or you read about other places and learn that that's not the norm in other places, you just think it's the norm. You just kind of get used to it. But now that I've been living in the UK and I generally don't watch TV, I don't have a TV at home because I'm not going to pay for a license. It's not worth it. Um, but if I were out and, watching on like public showings of sports and stuff, when they're, showing Wimbledon or whatever, um, there aren't any drug ads. But when I go home to the States to visit, and then it's just like, oh, there's like drug ads, and same thing in magazines and stuff. And it's like really frustrating when you're reading a magazine and half of it is like drug advertisements, because it's, if you're not from the US and you haven't experienced this, like they have to legally like include all of the fine print. So a drug advertisement will be like 3 pages, because you'll have like the main page, which is a picture of some family being like all happy or whatever because somebody took, ED medication, or somebody took like medication for their psoriasis, or whatever it is, the medication that they're advertising. But all of the pictures look the same. It's just basically some people like having a good time. um and then the next 2 pages is like all this fine print of like, these are the potential side effects, and this is what you need to talk to your doctor about, whatever, blah blah blah. And it's really frustrating that like half of your magazine is taken up with that kind of stuff. And of course, this taps into a bigger issue, which is, medicine as a for-profit business in the US, which is a whole other thing. And I did do a video on like the NHS, the Americans' view of the NHS compared to, healthcare in the US. So I won't get into that here, but oh yeah, I totally understand how coming from a place where you never see drug advertisements to a place where they are like everywhere would be weird. The date format, okay, yeah, but I'm not going to get on board with Europe and say like, yeah, they're right. It's just different. And I still have to sort of like remind myself, how am I going to write the date? And where am I for when I'm going to write the date, right? Because like if I'm back in the States and I have to write the date, then it's okay, I'll use the US version. And if I'm in the UK and the date is for someone else to read, then I'll use the UK version, but I still use the US version for myself. Like in my diary, it's, July 19th, not 19 July. But that's one of those things where I'm not gonna side with Europe on this. I just, each place to do their own thing. And yeah, it can be a little bit confusing, but that's pretty momentary. Once you figure out how it is, then you just switch off and on. It's whatever. Um, the gap in bathroom stalls. This is another thing that Americans would never think of. Because you're in there, you're doing your business, you're not thinking about anything else. It's normal. But then yeah, when you get to the UK or somewhere else in Europe and they don't have those gaps, and I especially really like bathrooms where the door actually comes all the way to the floor, and the way that you tell whether a stall is occupied is because they actually have an indicator, right, that says vacant or not vacant. I It's true, I don't understand why America has not like figured this out. Because there are still plenty of places where the way you figure out if a bathroom is occupied, a stall is occupied, is you kind of bend a little bit to see if there's feet, right? Which is ridiculous. So yeah, I do think that Americans can be a lot better of how they are designing their public bathrooms, for sure. The next one is long shorts. Okay, that's just strange to me that someone would complain about long shorts. And this is what the article says. Shorts are supposed to be short. It's right there in the name. So why many Americans defeat the purpose by wearing long shorts is perplexing to vacationers from abroad. Is it really? Are people visiting America and the thing that they're getting stuck on is like, oh, their shorts go all the way to their knees. Like their entire thigh is covered. How strange. Really? I If you're someone who actually is like confused by that, drop a comment in the section. But my guess is that this is maybe the writer of this article trying to pad it out with things. I feel like I must have seen people here wearing long shorts. Anyway, I that's in Red Solo Cup territory of I don't know why you would include this on this list. And then the last one is being a Karen. Okay, so yeah, obviously the term Karen originated in the US. And certainly there are plenty of people in the US who are Karens, and that's tied to our expectations of customer service, which we do have a lot higher expectations than I think a lot of other places do for customer service. However, I've definitely seen Brits be Karens. I don't think that that is a uniquely American thing. We might do it better, but I don't think um that a lot of Europeans or you know people from other parts of the world are coming to the US, and that's one of the first things that they're noticing, because I've definitely known Karens from not just in the UK but other countries that I've been to as well. So um that's it. That's the list. That's my take on these things. If anything that I talked about in these two videos is something that you'd like me to elaborate more on because it's kind of a bigger cultural difference or whatever, drop that in the comments. In the meantime, like, subscribe, tell your friends how gnarly this channel is, and I'll see you next time.